Hey guys, welcome back. You're listening to the Ancient Health Podcast, and we get to do a really fun part 2. So if you didn't listen to part 1, maybe do that. If this doesn't make sense, we're going to make it make sense. But we get to have a conversation, myself and Dr. Motley, and we're going to do part 2, really talking about unpacking triggers for infections. Because a lot of people, I think that people get better with some really good support nutritionally, lifestyle, but then all of a sudden, have you ever been just living your life feeling like you overcame, some chronic infection or disease or whatever it was that you had that was producing symptoms in your life? And then all of a sudden, it seems like nothing changed and things come back, like rearing their ugly head. And you're like, what just happened? Like, I was actually starting to feel better. And now I feel like I'm heading in reverse. I'm relapsing a little bit. Like, why are the wheels coming off? So we started talking about what some of these potential triggers are, because once we all experience infections, whether they're viral infections or pathogens, whatever it might be, we always have some memory of that in the body. And so all it takes is a specific trigger to come along that then reactivates that. And so a lot of times we may start to think, well, there must be something new, when in fact it was something old that just got a little lighter fluid on it and it came back raging with all the symptoms that you remember. So what we talked about were what some of those triggers were. And I think a lot of that episode really was wrapped into emotions, because emotions in large part are a huge piece of the puzzle. And I even would venture to say that they always play some part. Like, they always have some role in the picture of your health, but there can be other things like EMF and other environmental exposures that you're maybe unaware of that kind of are invisible. They're like invisible little invaders. So what we're going to talk about on this episode is the things that you can do to help support your body. This is kind of like okay, now that we maybe know what's going on, why I was triggered into having the symptoms again, or why I was triggered in inflammation again. Now we're going to hopefully give you some strategies to figure out, okay, now how can I support my body? How can I help fix the problem? Because at the end of the day, we're all looking for solutions. So that was like a really big intro / recap on where we've been. But I'm going to, welcome my co-host here, Dr. Motley. Thanks for joining me again. It's always so fun.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, hey, it's always great. Everybody out there loves us when we're out and we get to do any podcast together and we can chat. And I'm always excited when we can come back and we can talk about anything. I mean, especially like when it comes to the triggers, because I know we both deal with a lot of individuals that have conditions that would warrant us having to deal with the things that make things come up out of the blue. I think that now the continuation from the first talk is that when we talked about the emotions, I dig deeper in my brain about like what would be something else that would cause an amount of triggers. And I see in our culture today, though, one of the biggest things that I think create huge triggers are the amount of plaque and biofilm in the body. So I am not trying to get a little too technical about biofilms and plaquing. And some individuals will say, what do you mean by biofilms? In our bodies, we all have a general amount of like bacteria that's needed. We have good flora. We've got some not so great flora. We've got good fungus. We have good yeast. And at times, we are seeing that those things can create plaque, like a plaque on your tooth or plaque on your teeth or in your gums. And there's a point to this, everybody. But if you get plaquing or biofilms created by certain infections in the body, as Courtney was saying, is that now we're in a new age where we have so much more radiation in the air. And we have quite a bit of pesticides in our culture, like literally out here on the lawn there, you have, pesticides and herbicides being sprayed on the lawn. Now, when you have a biofilm, what I have been seeing and many researchers are seeing out there is that we're a culture that's raised on like genetically modified wheat and corn and subsidized corn. And those types of pesticides are now showing that they can be damaging to the gut. Now, when we talk about damage to the gut and having triggers, the hardest part now is that they're showing that even the pesticides and the genetically modified foods are able to basically change the expression of your DNA. With that, it's been harder in our healthcare and our culture today because this can be triggered and cause your microflora to actually create more mucus as a protective mechanism. So you get a point where you're eating all of these different types of foods. Your internal organs and your internal flora have to readjust and try to meet the demand to break down these foods. And now you're starting to see that you have certain microbes that feast on certain types of, wheat and certain types of corn. And they're just overgrowing in our culture today. And our bodies are adapting as well as they can. And these infections are growing quite a bit of mucus. We are becoming a culture that has lots of mucus and lots of inflammation with those types of plaque and film in the body. And this, along with EMF has been shown to what? Stimulate or aggravate the microbes that are already in your system. So if you have Lyme infections or if you have mold or candida, it has been shown that the infections are basically irritated by EMF. And then the infections will go into a protective mode and they start to produce more toxins. So they produce more toxins and they have more mucus and the cycle basically reoccurs. And with all that to say, it's like the perfect storm. It's like the movie, the one with George Clooney and with Mark Wahlberg, how it all came into one place. And now when we have a resurgence of infections or resurgence from an old problem, these are like the biochemical and the structural issues that can occur that cause something to come to the surface again. And our bodies are such great adapters. And so that's the biggest key right now is how well does the body adapt? And we adapt to a certain point, and with all the environmental toxins, and now we're going into 5G and possible 6G, what would cause those types of infections and microbes to go into protective mode? And I know, Courtney, I'm just going overboard, but if you think about when an infection is stimulated to go into defense mode, you'll weaken the host. It'll weaken you. And any time now that we've had an infection when we were a kid or when we're small or we had an initial infection, now has the opportunity to go rampant, to pop back out of the cell, go to another location, eat all the food, create more toxins. But yes, I can talk about the technical aspects of it, but I want the listener out there, and me and Courtney and I are really trying to identify and say, we can understand your frustration. Like, why do I keep getting sick? And you have to take all these things into account. I mean, you could go live on we could, get your own farm and grow all your own food.
Homestead.
I just don't know if I have all the, energy probably to do all my own chickens, but that is a possibility. So, that's just one angle of it.
Moral of the story, bottom line is Dr. Motley will not be homesteading unless you need to just be on a compound with other people, and then you can just like trade services where it's like, they'll take care of your chickens and you can do all the like testing and all that stuff.
Oh,
anyway, that's plan B, guys. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I just want to see you on a farm.
I could, I can hold my own. See it.
Yeah. Is that like a thing? Is that like Korean farming? Yeah.
I could be an old Korean farmer. It'd be great. I find that when, if I ever see myself like Korean farmers and always have like in old Korean time, they all have these different types of jackets. Like these are like old worker jackets like I wear. And they always look so cool. And they always have like a certain type of boots they wear too. So maybe it's in my future. I'm serious. Maybe that'd be good for me.
You're so close. Like you've already have the attire. So you kind of like look the part. Now you just need the chickens. I mean, you are headed in the right direction. So I'm going to fully support that.
We're going to do it.
Okay. So this is very interesting. And what I want to point out to anybody that's listening is like, this is some of the cascade, like what you just brought up about the biofilms. What happens is when these biofilms start to create they start interacting with the magnetic fields around us with all the EMF. There's more toxicity in the body. All of this starts to suppress the immune system. And what happens is over time, the immune system cannot control all of these different things. So when the immune system gets compromised and it's now down regulated to a degree, all of those old infections, like old viral infections, guess what? They come popping up out of nowhere because the immune system is now it's been fighting something for so long. It just can't keep control of everything that's going on. There's only so much capacity of every single system in the body, and they're all connected. So when you really start to drive hard on the immune system for an extended period of time, it ends up not being able to do its job very effectively. And that's where we start to see where that cascade of events, a breakdown in the body begins, where you're just ticking along and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what is happening? I feel like I haven't changed anything. That's what happens. It's those invisible threats and dangers that are slowly deteriorating the things, the very things that are going to be fighting and keeping you healthy. And it gets to a certain degree where now things are starting to come back out that have always been there, but they just are not controlled anymore. So is there any such thing as like a good biofilm? I feel like, are biofilms always bad?
No, there are really good biofilms. In fact, like if you research a lot of the studies on fungal biofilms and certain bacteria biofilms, a large majority of them are actually good for you. In fact, like if they're in the lining of the lungs, in the colon, and in the small intestine, those biofilms actually are very protective, and they nourish the actual lining to where you can actually pick up on more nutrients. So when we talk about a bacteria causing a biofilm, it's not, the idea for us to go out and try to clean out every single biofilm that we have. The hardest part is that if you know that you have a good biofilm and a bad biofilm, how do you know you're not destroying the good one? But there is an innate intelligence in the body, and this is my opinion. I hope it doesn't sound like a cop-out, but if you take a certain biofilm buster, I think your body knows which biofilms are needed to be exposed and to be killed off. So you don't want to get rid of the good stuff. And because the good stuff helps you with enzyme production and also with and growth of good bacteria in the digestive system. But we are seeing, though, today, like with the administration of like too many prescriptions and artificial foods and sweeteners and the fake fats that are in our diet today, they knowingly basically kill off those good bacteria that create the good biofilm. And so you're seeing higher incidences of dementia and Alzheimer's and MS because they will say that in most of those patients, there are a depletion of good bacteria and the good enzymes that those bacteria and fungus create in the body. And we see it all basically starting to turn in the times in the 1960s when they started using different types of pesticides and they started using different things in the agricultural system. For this to happen, though, you're starting to see like there's a very heavy decline in the mental health of the culture, and I think it's a little alarming. And how the rise of Alzheimer's and dementia, and I can't say it's completely correlated, but from the research, you're going to see that when the agricultural system changed and different types of pesticides and different types of techniques were administered, then you started to see people with more neurological imbalances and more triggering of old infections. For instance, though, right, Court, like a person could have, like, let's say they did get had polio, or if they had a viral infection like an old hepatitis, and maybe the body had enough energy and enough strength to actually fight it off and to keep it dormant, like it could actually handle it. But when you started adding all these things into the system, now you're starting to see people who are like in their 75 and 80 years old, and they're starting to get shingles. Because what? Like an old chickenpox virus that was pretty much dormant and the body kind of walled it off. Now it has all these other, like Courtney said, all these other different things that are going on in the body. It's like now it's raising histamine and mast cell reaction. And now these infections start to rise to the surface. They're like, hey, I got some extra food that I can absorb in other cells. I can travel freely in the body to other locations. So there are good biofilms, to answer your question. But now we're starting to see that all the things that the agricultural and the pesticide industries, and we're starting to see with now the EMFs starting to get very, very heavy out there, is we're starting to see a big decline in neurological health and triggering of all the viruses and such that are hiding. Because where do viruses love to hide? They love to hide in nerve cells, basically, because they have a lot of ATP, a lot of energy. I know that was a lot. That's a handful, guys, but I just want you to know that eating clean and trying to keep yourself free from EMF is a big priority when you want to basically keep yourself from being triggered.
Okay, that's super helpful. And now I have to ask, what is your favorite biofilm buster? And is that something that you feel like most people would benefit from taking from time to time? Like, is there a cycling of using something like this that would be beneficial? Or are there any risks or downsides into just using it blindly? Do you need to have testing? Do you need to know that there's something present? Or is it like, hey, yeah, you're going to build up biofilms that are not good. They're not the good kind of biofilms from time to time. It would probably be good to use something that helps bust some of those up. What's your recommendation for that?
Biggest signs and symptoms I would consider is if a person gains weight and they get a lot of inflammation weight and they can't drop it very quickly. Also, too, if they eat foods and they grow a stomach that feels like it's very filled with fluid and they can feel it in the digestive tract, that would necessarily be something that would point me to a biofilm. So those are two of my biggest things that would show up. So when you have those type of signs, and some people say, well, I always bloat. Well, it's always parasites. Well, those parasites are probably getting off biofilm. That's when I would go into using a biofilm buster. I would not necessarily go and take a biofilm buster just thinking I'm going to go and take it. And the reason being is because you could open up biofilms that house a lot of different types of infections, like viral, like fungal, like yeast, like parasites, and they could spread and it could be a little overwhelming to your system. So to me, it's like I look into basically those same things I just mentioned. Like if you know that you bloat really well right after you eat, gaining weight and you can't lose it, like you're doing everything, you're dieting, you're exercising, you're like, I've done everything. That's a biofilm. Another one is when you look at your stool, if you poop out and you see mucus and foam like intermittently and you have that kind of feeling and you always have a sour stomach, biofilm. Smelly feet, smelly underarms, biofilm. So my suggestion would be I like Allergy Research Group. You can write that down. They got one called Biofilm Neutralizer. And there's this other one, Court. I'm going to look right now. I saw it the other day. It's by a company, Native Formulas, and they've got one called Restore 3. And I forgot the ladies who started the company, but they had it all about biofilms. And I've been seeing patients take that on their own. And it's been doing tremendous work. So if you have those signs and signals and you're like, I've had it for a very long time, don't be surprised if you start taking it and you start seeing literally mucus flush out. I had a patient come in end of last week and she was so excited because she started getting colonics. So I said, I think you need to do colonics or coffee enemas. So she said she took it on herself to take something for biofilm. And I didn't know that she did it. And she said that she released so much mucus because I kept finding strep indicators in her gut. She released so much mucus in 2 sessions, and she was like, I literally changed my life. I can actually think now because she had such bad Lyme disease. So those are my signs and signals. I like biofilm disruptors. One of the best natural one is Japanese knotweed. Japanese knotweed is probably one of the best biofilm busters in a natural form, like an herb.
Okay, so talk to me about biocidin, because this is something that I have used a lot in the past. It's very powerful, but I have found it to be very helpful with children just because of the oral suspension. Like you can just dose it in drops, but it is a potent, like kind of combination of several different herbs. Like, so I'm actually interested in what your opinion is of that as a biofilm disruptor.
I like biocidin quite a bit. I think it's probably, I'm glad you mentioned it because I did not mean to forget it because it's probably one of the strongest ones. Especially when they use biocidin, like within toothpaste, I realized like they started putting it in toothpaste, but like you said before, like people with Lyme disease, when they had really bad film issues and gut distension, biocidin was one of the strongest that I found. In fact, like when you did a few drops went a long way. So everybody out there, I would heavily consider biocidin, and they actually have some in capsule form now. What I do tell you to do is start slow with biocidin. Don't go super fast, because what I have seen is that when they'll go in there and it will pull out so much of the biofilm. If a biofilm is holding in, like we saw, many microbes, they'll feel worse, but I've seen them where people will just have really explosive poops where they're just like pushing stuff out. So biocidin is super strong. That's why Courtney likes it. Courtney's like, well, I just want to get it all out. I had a patient that came in today. It reminded me of Courtney because I was like saying stuff to her about like, you probably need to get this part cleaned up. And her face was just like, and I was like, you just want to get all of this out right now, don't you? And you don't even, yep. I just want to get it all out and I want to take all. And I was like, don't take all of those. Don't take all. I'm just saying. But biocide is like it is one of my favorites, girl. I do like it.
Yeah. It's so true. Like, I'm always like, what's the heavy guns? Like, I want the heavy artillery, and we're going like full throttle out of the gate, which is, I don't recommend, but that is just naturally like, I am just an all or nothing person. But I will tell you, I had horrific gut infections for a very long time. And I also have given it to the kids from time to time because they for sure have had some gut stuff. You do have to be careful with it because you will feel terrible. Like headaches, you'll start herxing, like you'll start having detox reactions because it will start to just clear stuff out so quickly that you can't get it out fast enough. So a lot of times taking it with a binder is really helpful, which is a part of like their protocol. So we'll put some of these things in the show notes. I want to ask you about, something like enzymes like serrapeptase or nattokinase, like a systemic enzyme, because I think that those can be really helpful as well. They're a little bit more gentle, a little bit different than something like a biocide, which is a lot of different herbs, but using some enzymes can also help with some of the mucoid plaque and some of the fibrin, things that are build up in the body, because that's huge. I mean, doing some of these things can literally change your life. Doing colonics, doing coffee enemas, even if you're just doing water enemas, while you're taking some of these biofilm disruptors, you will see the mucoid plaque coming out, and it all holds on to toxins, and getting that out of your body can make you, I mean, it's like night and day. So I know there are people listening that are like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm bloated, I can't lose weight. These are simple, like they are so safe and easy to use at home, and you can get your hands on these things very easily. So I'm glad we're talking about it, because I think that people can see dramatic relief when their immune system gets compromised and they've just got an overwhelm of buildup of biofilm and plaque and toxins in their body. So what is your take on systemic enzymes in comparison to something that's more herbal in nature?
I think they both work really well. I think that what I have seen is like you can do, if you get the right herb that really resonates with the individual, and I say resonates, it's like for your genes and for your body type, if you find an herb, it's like hitting the nail on the head, that it really connects with your cells. And that's why I think muscle testing and bioresonant works really important. You can have an herb that works as well as an enzyme. Enzymes, there's no second guessing. You take an enzyme and it's going to go after the plaquing, and to the point where it's like, depending on how many international units are in that one capsule. I have no bias towards either one though, Court. I think they both work really well. I think that when you say nattokinase, serrapeptase, lumbrokinase, when you take an enzyme and you do a coffee enema, and let's go back up. I'm with you because Court and I used to talk about enzymes, and Court was really big about enzyme therapy, and I really respect that. I think and very good because, you know, if you're taking something like a nattokinase from soy or a lumbrokinase and you're starting to clean out the colon, but remember, you could have something that's going now into your bloodstream, cleaning out all the old blood debris. And so with that in a coffee enema, to me, whatever gets the job done. I've had patients that just take high amounts of Japanese knotweed, a little bit of biocidin, and they do great. And then I've had others that don't even want it when I do muscle testing. Overall, though, Court, I would say those enzymes, I've never really found a person who didn't, if they had biofilms, didn't need the actual enzyme. So enzymes, I pretty much were like a home run whenever I tested it on them. I would say that also, when Courtney's talking about the coffee enema, we have made jokes about it in the past, but I don't take it lightly. And the reason being is because Court would talk about coffee enemas. I've had patients that did coffee enemas. There's this one book by Jethro Kloss. He's an old time doctor, and it's called Back to Eden. And he was an old minister that was a doctor. And he used to in his book, he would talk about story after story after story about using coffee enemas on patients who had chronic, valley fever, chronic Lyme, and seeing those people get better. And then Courtney was feeling better because she'd had some bloating. Well, I did colonics when I had Lyme disease. I was doing them every week for 6 months, and it really cleaned me up. But what I did notice is that I had patients that come in right after me and Courtney had really talked about coffee enemas, and some of these patients were the cleanest I've had. and they were doing coffee enemas almost every day. But I had with the patients that were doing some of the enzymes, they started doing some coffee enemas, and they only had to do it like 2 times a week. And most of all their inflammatory mast cell histamine issues that I've seen with my patients have been going away. So the power of an enzyme therapy with the coffee enema or colonic, I just like coffee enemas because of the coffee action. It really just strips all the bad biofilms out. So I'd have no leaning towards one or the other. If it helps the patient, Court, I'm all about it. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, this is so helpful. And, I think just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, if you're like listening to this and you're like, okay, well, I'm a little confused. Here's my personal take. I think cycling things is always a great approach. If you're like, I don't even know which one to start with, I would find one and try it. And then in 2 to 3 months, if you're still not feeling better, like try something else. You don't need to stay on that one thing for 2 to 3 months. But I just think for a lot of people, you can really, it's like you're using different pathways to kind of accomplish the same thing. But a lot of times our bodies respond a little bit differently. And even if I find something that works, I won't just stay on it. I'll generally try something that's different because it may overlap what that last one did, but it may actually cover a little bit more territory. And I find I find this just in general, cycling things that's the way that our bodies like to operate. They don't just want the same thing, like cut and dry every single time. Like your body likes to adapt, and it will always be adapting. So that's the thing. Like by giving it something different, you now may be clearing out something that other herb or whatever it was enzyme wasn't catching before. So I think personal experimentation goes a really long way. Just get bold enough to try some stuff. People are going to freak you out and scare you. But what we're talking about, this stuff is safe. Like you don't need to worry about it. Don't Google coffee enema. He'll tell you you're going to blow your colon up. It's not going to happen. Take it from somebody that's probably done more coffee enemas than, like half of the population of South Carolina. And you're going to be just fine. And my colon's doing great. So, I mean, I'm just here to tell you, these are great tools. And there's no one way to skin the cat. So if you're like, I need a written protocol and strategy, just start with some stuff and just kind of document how you feel. And if something isn't working, great, you can change it. There's other options. So we're kind of just trying to give you some different ideas of how you can approach this if you're experiencing some of the symptoms we're talking about. So hopefully that's helpful.
And when we talk about trying things, there are many times when I will do that. I will try something at least for 2 weeks and see if it actually creates a change. And, people out there, if you have an infection that keeps rising to the surface and you're trying like you're a biofilm disruptor, and remember that each person has a certain types of cells and each cell is not the same than the next person. And some little plant enzymes and plant constituents stick to cells in one person better than the other. And so you get different actions. So don't be discouraged if you try something for so long and you're like, oh, this doesn't work. I'm telling you, if you knew as many herbs as I've taken in my life, I have taken the worst tasting herbs. I know many of you out there have, but to the point where I took stuff that it helped, but it actually tasted good to me after a while. People are like, you take that? I'm like, yeah, it actually is good to me now. It's like, but I finally got the benefits. There's a funny saying that certain herbs, they'll actually taste really bad because your body needs it until it tastes good, and then you don't. And that's one thing I've learned is like, that's when I stop. I'm like, I don't need it as much anymore. So anyway, let's go. What was the next point, Court? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. This is great. I know okay. So we started with biofilms. This is great because the biofilms are kind of, I feel like that's entry point number one. Like we've got to tackle the biofilms when we're talking about infections that keep coming back. Now, once you tackle biofilms, I actually you mentioned shingles, and I just have this feeling like somebody is listening that is desperately in need of some support with shingles. personally, I've just heard of it. It's coming up so frequently with a lot of people. So I actually just want to touch on that because I really feel like it's important to talk about it because it's relevant. What are your thoughts on shingles coming up for a lot of people? How are you treating, or what are you seeing work when you're working with patients that are struggling with that?
Okay. So usually when a person has high amounts of shingles, first thing I do is, of course, the severity. Second thing is always location. So when I say, what do I do with it? I always try to find out the area. I've had patients that have predominantly shingles that will go into the ear, around the ear, crusty little pimples and cysts and welts in the ear and on the jawline and on the eye. So it can cause Bell's palsy. For some reason, the virus loves to get on the nerves around the facial nerve and sometimes into the deep inner ear. When shingles come up, if most of the time, a majority of the time, Court, if you ask those patients about their hearing, a lot of them have tinnitus and have hearing loss because that virus loves to get on the nerves into the inner ear. Second place is on the rib cage. It loves to get on the area around the thoracic nerve, especially around the liver and sometimes around the left side of the pancreas. So it can be so severe is when a biofilm in that area finally starts to unravel and starts to open up, or it comes out of dormancy. If the immune system gets strong enough to where that person finally wants to get that virus out, you have to be careful by pushing it out too quickly. So when people do biofilm therapy, or if they do coffee enemas, or they do something that's very cleansing, taking tons of glutathione, which I love, if you activate your immune system and you start to see the shingles come up, the prevalence of it is this. Now, I had to be careful when I say these things. But if you had chicken pox when you're younger, and chicken pox has been known to get into the nerve cells because it feeds off the energy of nerve cells. If you didn't actively take herbs or do a cleanse when you're young, which none of us did. What are we talking about? We didn't do that. And then you have a trigger or something pull it up to the surface. It is where that virus needs to relocate. That's what it's trying to do. So the prevalence, I think, in our culture, I can't say this for a fact. So I have seen that biofilms and EMF and certain chemical toxicities that I really can't talk about, but I would say this, those have been shown to aggravate this nervous system enough to allow some of these infections to come surface through research that I've seen and patients that have come into the office. To work with it, I use things that are just basically antiviral in Chinese medicine. In fact, I would use high amounts of woad. Woad supreme is a very antiviral, and I've seen neem powder do really well with shingles. Now, I'm not saying don't go get an antiviral medication because I know it's horrible. I've had patients come in. I had one patient, Court, came in from Australia, and he's a very nice guy, an old pastor, and he goes, I'm feeling kind of down. I got shingles. He came in, Court. He had so much shingles on. I felt so bad for the guy. I mean, it was welted. I was like, you need to go to the hospital and get medication because that is painful. And he goes, I can hardly sit and hardly go to sleep because it was oozing. But you have to realize that there's a biofilm involved, like taking neem and woad to clean it out is important. But remember this, guys, let's not get too complicated. But the liver strength, methylation, is something you would have to consider because you have to know if your liver has the strength and capacity to absorb and use B vitamins, and then that activates your vitamin D usage. That's methylation. So after a while, if you keep having shingles, people are like, I want to know what to do with shingles. Yes, I love woad, which is Chinese isotis, and neem. Herbs help. They always do. But you'll have to get your methylation checked out. Maybe that's another session. Let's make it real simple and easy. But you have to get your liver to turn on to get rid of those old viruses. Or in fact, they'll just keep coming back.
Is it not recommended to try these things unless somebody knows their methylation? Or is it like, hey, if you try them and they're not working, or if you try them and you're having a reaction, then you may want to start digging a little deeper?
That's the point. Perfect.
Okay.
If you try them, like if somebody came to me and said they have viral stuff, I always go into, and I need to mention this, like the woad or the isotis, I see if them starts to make relief. And I really get into homeopathics, like Desbio. Some of them have good homeopathics for things like old varicella. Varicella is the name of the zoster. And that's an old herpetic type virus. So you can find those homeopathic remedies plus herbals to help clean it out. And there's a ton of good herbal remedies out there. If you guys research it out there to help with shingles, I've seen patients that do it on their own. The one lady that had it on her face, she would take a bath and she would do different types of salts and magnesium compounds, and she'd put different types of glutathione producing oils in her bath and stick her face halfway down in there every day, twice a day. And I'm telling you, she solved up within 3 days when she did it. So like Courtney says, try it. Don't be afraid. Like, now, if it flares it up, probably need to find somebody who does a little like natural health and maybe can do a little testing on you. But methylation would be the key to help it be sustained for a long time.
Okay. So these are great. These are great for, yeah. So for the immune system, are there any other recommendations? Because I want, shingles is specific, so these are great. But for what we're talking about too, just to give people kind of, as we kind of wrap this up, I just want to make sure that we cover anything else for specifically the immune system, because that's going to be the piece of the puzzle that's going to probably need the most support, because that's why you're seeing these symptoms of the viruses come back, is because the immune system is weakened.
Totally
so
right,
what are your other kind of like little tricks of the trade or tips and pearls for immune system support?
Okay. Really easy for me. I like to think about, like, because I don't want to spout them off too quickly. So I'll say it very succinctly. Vitamins A, D, and K are a must. Vitamin K, you have to ask if you're on a blood thinner. Vitamin C, at least 5,000 milligrams every day, one that you use. Astragalus, high amounts of astragalus, 2 to 3 capsules a day. Just right there. Vitamin A, D, and K, vitamin C, and astragalus. The other part is that you would have to find a vitamin B complex that doesn't make you have the shakes or make you feel shaky or make you urinate too much yellow. I'm saying, but gives you actual energy. If you work on your body's vitamin D levels and its absorption rate with those compounds and those vitamins and the astragalus, you'll start to see that your immune system will raise naturally. And another one I see work wonders is a comprehensive mushroom blend. Like you can go to, what was it? Paul Stamets, company, but Ohm has one. They have the multiple mushroom compounds. You could literally put it into your coffee or put it into something. And Courtney and I see that. We'll put some stuff into our coffee and make it a blend. It is so immune modulating. And so I love mushrooms. My body thrives on mushrooms. Like literally, I'll fight off everything. Like I'll literally get random like sores and stuff. I'm like, what is going on? But I like it. I like it when I find stuff like that. So, those are my top picks if you're going to ask me. So mushrooms, astragalus, vitamin C, A, D, and K, and vitamin B complex.
This is so good. I fully in agreement with all of those. And I definitely agree with the mushrooms. If you watch anything, like I'm always, posting pictures or at least referencing my coffee, because I'm literally fueled by reishi mushroom, I think. But the best combination, if you want to bring these together, the one that I have found is I do King coffee, which I love. It's spores of Ganoderma reishi, very immune supportive. And then I add in for coffee creamers. This is another way to like actually be getting a lot of nutrients without having to just swallow pills. My friend Emily Morrow, who we had on the show several times, she's brilliant. She has a coffee creamer, that's based in a coconut powder. It's like lightly sweet, but doesn't just taste like coconut. Just kind of tastes I don't know, just creamy, like vanilla kind of flavored. But it's extremely clean. Like sourcing is unbelievable, but she's also got vitamins A, D, E, and K in there. So you add 2 scoops of this creamer to the mushroom coffee. I drink it like 6 times a day. I'm not even kidding. And I love it. It's like, if everything else goes and that's all I was left with, I could probably survive. That's kind of like the bare bones, but that's such a good combo. And honestly, anytime you can like take your supplement in like food form where you enjoy it, I feel like it's even better. So I'll make sure I put the links, and we'll put all the links to what Dr. Motley just referenced too, but just little ideas for you.
If you guys ever have times where your immune's functioning too high, just, you pulse it. You can take a day or 2 off and let your body reset. So, try these steps. And remember, when we talk about biofilms and triggers, you don't have to like be afraid of it. Just try these few steps, do the coffee enemas, do like some enzymes and see if they help break things apart. You can help your body heal. And that's what we're here to help you with.
So good. Okay. Well, Dr. Motley's on a tight schedule, so we're going to send him off to go finish all of his things that he needs to do. But, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this little mini kind of, I guess it wasn't that much of a mini. It's actually like 40 minutes now that I'm looking at the clock, but we tried to keep it a mini. So that's the best we got. We'll see you guys on the next episode.